Hey, welcome back. In this lesson, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the second part of Maya's narrative. Now, this is really important because if we can understand what's going on in the unconscious mind here, we can appreciate when we get out of time and space, the resistance to go back within it. Also, what's going to become clear as we go through the narrative is why when the dreamer comes out into time and space and associates with a dream character in the dream, why it will always be associated with playing the perennial innocent victim. So that's what will become evident as we go through the second part of Maya's narrative. So having said that, let's quickly go back to this first part of the narrative where we have Maya talking to the dreamer after she has chosen him. And remember, what she has instructed is that what's on the other side of this veil isn't the stuff that is really there in reality. Rather, there's this fire because the dreamer has destroyed reality. That he has had the power to completely demolish where he has come from, and that is always going to be associated with this kind of original feeling of doing something wrong. That this is always the underlying thing that the dreamer is going to feel bad for, and that is destroying reality. So with that feeling of doing something wrong comes the feeling of being something wrong, and that's the feeling of being completely guilty. So remember when he first came down to Maya's mind, he had this complete feeling of euphoria for having this sense of individuality at no cost. But very quickly it's gone from the heights of euphoria already down to the pits of hell with this feeling of intense guilt. And just think, how much that would be on the ontological level to literally think the dreamer has destroyed reality. So once we appreciate that, we can start to appreciate why there's such enormous issues in the world, because everything in the world is obviously being projected by these fundamental and core beliefs. So with that complete sense of ontological guilt comes the sense of this amazing fear that now at this level he thinks is going to be completely a counterattack for the first attack he made on him, but at a level where our minds can't actually comprehend. So you could say that what the dreamer has become at this stage is the ultimate victimizer, that in his mind he thinks he has had the power to destroy reality. But remember, at this point we have to keep in awareness that all of this is just made up in Maya's mind, because reality is just being reality. Satchitananda, remember, is eternal. So there's no way that whatever's happening in the madness of Maya's mind has any effect on it at all. But it does have effect on the dreamer who has gone down and fallen into it. So remember, the dreamer is the one that needs to heal, not reality itself. So once we keep that in mind, it's keeping it in mind that this is all fictitious, that is the healing for the dreamer. But we do have to bring it up to awareness because it has been so suppressed into the unconscious that we actually look at these things and actually think that they're actually real, because we can only look at them with Maya. And because Maya is reflected in all the world, then everything is going to be reflecting the belief that this actually happened, that the dreamer has done this awful thing that is wrong, and is this awful thing that is wrong, and deserves to be punished. So once we have that awareness, we have the dreamer obviously unconsciously wanting to leave, from the second split, because he thinks some punishment is going to be coming from the other side of it. And now this is what the second part of Maya's narrative is all about. It's about bringing him down to here and getting him on to the third split. So over to the third veil of these veils of forgetfulness. So remember that when we go over one of these veils, we forget what we've come from, and all we now identify is what we have gone on to. So what we're going to go on to for the dreamer now in Maya's mind in this third split is this innocent victim that's completely fearful. And Maya has done this for a very specific reason. So remember, as I said, once we're outside of our Satchitanandana, which is the home of innocence, we're always unconsciously going to want to get that innocence back. So if Maya left the dreamer in this state of complete ontological guilt, then the dreamer might just, completely rebel and be able to transcend and go over this second split and reassociate with Shiva, remember who he really is in reality, and all of Maya's dream will just dissolve. So what Maya has to do is she has to give him this kind of sense of having his innocence back. But as we will see, it's a counterfeit innocence because it's always going to be based on somebody else having the guilt for what he thinks he has originally done. So up here in innocence, there is only innocence. There's no concept of guilt. That the experience is only innocence. Whereas down here we have both the innocence and the guilt. So the only way that the individual experience can last is by having this sense of guilt, because it will always, as I said, be associated with attacking and destroying the oneness or the Brahman. So the way that Maya makes this third split is by saying, at the very start, what happened is that you asked your father if you could go off and create your own reality. And do you know what his response was? It was nothing. That he didn't even acknowledge you. So in reality, what was happening is that Brahman, which is only who the dreamer is in reality, didn't acknowledge who the dreamer had become in his sleep simply because he couldn't. Because Brahman, if Satchitananda is the oneness, then for that oneness to acknowledge something outside of himself would obviously deny reality, if reality is that oneness. To acknowledge something other than that would be to completely confound the truth of the oneness. So it wasn't so much that he ignored him on purpose, he just didn't even know he existed. But remember, that's why Shiva came with him into the dream, to remind him as a way to escape, to get back up to who he really is in reality. That he is always going to be able to reassociate with him, but he's never going to, as the dreamer, he's never going to be able to go off and actually change who he is in reality. So what Maya is saying at this stage is, well, so it's really Brahman, your father, who made the first attack on you, because he withheld the power to create reality. That you don't have the power to create reality. You had to ask him, and he said no. So really, he made the first attack on you. So what Maya's doing here is she is obviously splitting off the kind of sin and the guilt when the dreamer thought he made the first attack on reality, and saying, no, reality made the first attack on you. So this is how this dynamic of denial and projection works. That first of all, the dreamer is now denying who he thinks he is in reality, and then projecting the parts of himself he doesn't like onto this new made-up entity. And the parts that he doesn't like is the parts that thinks he has attacked. So therefore, he makes this new father up, Maya makes this new father up in her mind, which we will call Yama. So Yama now is the first victimizer, that he takes on these the parts that the dreamer and the second split didn't like, and places them on this made-up father who notices individuality. So remember, the dreamer wanted his individual experience, so he needs a father that actually acknowledges that individual experience. Because his real father, Brahman, who the dreamer really is in reality, doesn't acknowledge anything other than what's happening up above this first veil. So what we have now is this kind of authority figure, Yama, the father that notices individuality. So now that he notices the individual has obviously the sense of being real, because in Maya's mind, she has made this father the father. So she has changed who he really is in reality, which is perfect love that only acknowledges oneness, into this father that acknowledges an individual, but in a way that he thinks that the son has first attacked him. So now he's coming in hot after him. So that's why the dreamer now, as associated with this innocent victim, is completely fearful. Now, if we think about time and space, of how big and vast it is, and how small we are as bodies, we can start to get a grasp of how big and powerful the dreamer must be experiencing this Yama father in the mind. That if the dream itself is a projection of these thoughts, then the dreamer must know, when he's in the unconscious mind with this father who's coming after him, he stands absolutely no hope, that he's just trembling in his boots. That remember the power that the dreamer first thought he had of being able to attack and destroy reality is now given over to this Yama. So just think how powerful this father coming after him must be. And because there's only him in the mind, then there's no way to escape. And that's why this is all part of Maya's narrative, to keep the dreamer going down further and further and further away from this point of power, when he can just simply choose, the dreamer can choose against Maya's dream for Shiva and wake up back to reality. However, when we get down here, Maya's going to give him a get out of free jail card, which is, we can completely, again, repress all of this and project ourselves out of the mind, and then we're going to leave this father who's after you up there, and then you'll be able to go out and have all those things I promised you, having this individual life where you're going to be able to go and chase your dreams. So hopefully you can see by this setup that what we have now is the dreamer as being this innocent victim, that he no longer remembers it was his choice to come down and experience Maya and then think that he's destroyed reality. Rather, now he just thinks he exists as an individual through no fault of his own. And then and it's this kind of father, Yama, who is the one who is now insane, who's just kind of coming after him for simply asking, pleasantly, to be able to create his own reality. And now this is going to be reflected in the dream when the dreamer is born as a body in time and space to, a mother and father. So straight away there, we can also see this theme of being the innocent victim carrying on. That the dreamer then has this, through obviously denial, has no memory of how any of this stuff, which is in the unconscious, has actually happened. Rather, he'll just walk on stage as a body and think, well, everything that's all something else that is doing everything other than my own mind. And therefore, I can be I can play the innocent victim because I didn't choose it. So that's probably a really good place to stop for now. But what I would encourage you is to keep that in awareness as you are going about your day. Is just start to pick up on all the different victimization stories that you hear around you, be they in your personal life, or be that in the TV shows or in the news that you watch, or in the kind of news articles that you read. How there's always built on this sense of being powerless and being a victim to something else. And remember that all of that is just a setup in the unconscious mind, because a dream is always going to reflect the ideas that are in the mind that is projecting it. So if you can start to notice and be aware of how even your own mind will just automatically go there, just know that all this is just obviously part of Maya's narrative for the individual to be an individual, but not have any of the obviously memory and responsibility for it coming about. And as you can actually be aware of that, then you will obviously be bringing this unconscious material to mind to be released. And that's all that this is about. It's about bringing things up to awareness so they can actually be seen from the point of power with the memory of who we are, so that we can actually let them go and reconnect with who we are in reality. Because if we don't do that, we're always going to be stuck as a victim down here in Maya's dream as a body in time and space. And we all know that the outcome for that is not great. So the only way out is to bring up this kind of unconscious material, but not in a sense of punishment, only in a sense of letting it go, remembering that in reality we are innocence itself. So that's the most important thing to remember as we start to observe all of this material in the unconscious mind and all of the kind of reflections in our dream life. That it is all only in Maya's dream, that is all part of her fictitious story, that really the only thing that is happening is this state of perfect innocence, Sat Chidananda. So with that, feel free to keep the conversation going down below, and I'll see you in the next lesson.